All right, Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited for this conversation because I've had a few moms on the show, but uh, I'm excited to talk about parenting. And you're a boy mom, and you also have a great website. I love the name of it, Bad Christian Moms.
Yep, that's
So
me.
I'm excited to talk about what that means and how you came up with that. Um, but before we dive into that, can you share with listeners your about your family and your background?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm married and we have three boys. They're 12, almost 9, and 6. And my background, so I started getting a master's in counseling from Western Seminary, and in the middle of that, got pregnant with my first, with my second. And then I started a private practice to start working on licensure and got pregnant with my third. And at that point, I decided I wanted to just be home with the kids and not try to juggle the professional life and the mom life at the same time. And so I just did the stay-at-home mom gig for about 5 years. And then my husband he's a hospice nurse, and he was getting ready for a break or a change. And so I kind of had my eye open for something that I could do to either contribute to making the money or even, transition to being the primary breadwinner. And I ended up sort of stumbling upon this coach that helped counselors start online coaching businesses. And so, it was sort of a whirlwind, but it's been a little over a year. I guess it's been a year and a half. And now I have an online group coaching business for bad Christian moms. And it is a ton of fun. It's been, there's been a lot of growing and changing that I've had to do. But most for the most part, it's just been a ton of fun to do it, and also just to get to be with my clients. Like, my clients really are the best part of my job.
Yeah. So wow, a year and a half ago, great timing
Yeah,
for
I
for
know.
for a coaching coaching moms, coaching
For an
parents.
all online coaching business. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I know I said I was excited about talking to you about parenting, but I do want to spend a little time talking about how that's been growing your business, because um, several of our listeners are fellow coaches and counselors too, and starting a business, I'm guessing, is like um, being a parent, having a baby business.
Yeah,
So
kind of coddling it along, and always, yeah, it takes a lot of energy, and it'll it'll kind of, undo you, just like parenting can.
mm, yeah. The uh, so w- what are some of the ways, or what have you learned uh, uh, in this at the start of this online coaching business?
Um, well, a lot. I think one of the biggest, like, maybe more philosophical things that I've learned is um, that it's okay to fail. And I think that has become like one of the things that I feel really passionate about now as like a business owner, and starting to, employ people, that I want to have almost like a business culture of like, it's okay to fail. Like, we can try stuff and have it totally bomb, and it's totally fine. Like,
Mm,
obviously we want to learn from those things, but to just sort of ignore any, like, fear or shame that you might be feeling about trying something new or putting yourself out there, but just kind of ignore that and do it anyway, and enjoy it, have fun with it, and
mm,
then just learn, and and go with the process of having, you have to fail a lot. You have to try a lot and fail a lot and be okay with that. And I
Mm.
think that's one of the biggest sort of like philosophical muscles that I've been growing in a lot, is just becoming really okay with that. I mean, Jesus Christ, like, he died for all my sin. Like, I'm a raging sinner and he died for me. So if that is already taken care of, like, I don't really need to worry about whether or not I, bomb a live or
Mm.
misspeak in a coaching call, or, that's just small beans compared to what I have done to the Lord and what he has already done for me, if that makes sense.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah. The not uh, putting fear and shame aside, and, and it, it's okay to make mistakes. So those are some of the mistakes. Uh, what are some uh things the risks that you took that ended up being great or fine?
Um, well, the whole, kind of starting the whole thing in the first place was a big risk. There was a financial investment to like hire this coach, and then each little piece of it along the way, there was all, it's like it seemed like there was just always a new risk, a new thing I had to try that was uncomfortable. Like, even just having an online, like a social media, like I was not a big social media person. I had a Facebook account, but didn't do much with it. And my whole business is like Facebook based. Like, so I'm in there a lot in a lot of different ways. And so having to sort of get over the idea of like, people are watching me, and what are they thinking of me, and just kind of having to push past the risk of, some people aren't going to like me, or some people are going to think I'm a dork, or some people are going to really hate what I have to say about
Mm.
Christianity, or about the gospel, or whatever. um and then I don't know, but each little step, and then uh getting my first client, like, that felt like a risk, having my first clients, and like really wanting them to be happy with what I could provide for them, and the risk of them not being happy, and
Mm.
what will I do with that if they aren't happy, how will I work through that.
Yeah.
And then now kind of the next piece is, having, I have a couple contract people working for me. So there's the risk of like promising I can pay, promising I can pay them. And, the risk of, failing at that.
Mm.
So yeah, so that's a few out of many.
Yeah. Yeah. That what you just described, that does seem intimidating and scary to me, uh, because I'm tend to do the thing where I wouldn't want to hire help until like way beyond the time like I need it. uh, so and I'm not there yet. So that's encouraging. Yeah. Um, can you uh share a little bit like how you got the idea uh of of doing the coaching, like beyond the another income for your family, for your home, but what's kind of like the vision for your coaching?
Well, I feel like there's a couple different ways I could answer that, but I think probably the most relevant is, so this coach that I hired to coach me in starting this business asked me in our first, like, free phone call to see if it would be a good fit. She was kind of picking my brain to see like if there would be a niche um, that would work. And she asked me like, what could you talk about all day long and not get bored? And I said, I can talk about kind of how motherhood can bring out the worst in you,
Mm.
and how the gospel applies to that. Like, I can talk about that all day long. I can talk about like the sin that kind of comes out when you're a mom of young kids, especially maybe at home alone. And then how the gospel really applies even to those tiny moments in your boring, mundane little day, how the gospel applies to that. I could talk about that all day long. And so, she was like, I think it'll work. And eventually down the road, we came up with a name for the group. So I have a Facebook group called Bad Christian Moms. And, that in business terms, that's kind of my big funnel. That's where people could start to, if they are interested in a group called Bad Christian Moms, that's going to attract a certain kind of person. It's not going to attract a mom that's feeling like she's a really good mom. And it's not going to attract a mom that feels like she's a really good Christian. It's going to attract a mom that is kind of feeling at the end of herself, is maybe a little confused about how if I'm saved and if I have the Holy Spirit, why am I behaving like this behind closed doors? Like, why am I yelling at my kids? Or why am I so filled with resentment towards my husband when he comes home from work? Why am I so touched out that I don't really want to have intimacy anymore? Why, how does Jesus Christ fit in, and my relationship with him fit in with all of these like negative things I'm seeing in myself? I mean, like for example, I didn't realize I had a temper problem until I had kids. I didn't, there was things coming out of me after I became a mom that I did not realize were in there. And it was really, really hard to have to come to terms with that, with having to see myself like that. I think a lot of times when we're frustrated with other people, or that I think a lot of times underneath it all is just that those people are bringing something out in me that I really wish wasn't there. My kids were bringing anger and bitterness out of me that I really was horrified to see was in there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't abusing my kids, or it wasn't like that. It was just like losing my temper every once in a while, or going through the day just like feeling sorry for myself the whole time, or having to clean up another mess and just like cursing under my breath. I'm so sick of this, kind of just the normal stay-at-home mom stuff. But in a way, it really brought me back to like, I became a Christian when I was 18. And before that, I was a bit of a wild child in high school. And so I had a lot of like really obvious, blatant sins like going on when I became a Christian. And so, there was that, just sort of that turning away from it all that was sort of more dramatic. And I feel like, but then I was pretty well behaved for like many, many years, pretty well behaved on the outside. But then motherhood like brought all of this like sin from the inside to the surface and made me look at it and go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this? And after several years, and my church was a huge part of me kind of connecting the dots between all of this ugly sin coming out of my heart, and seeing how it's perfect. It's, that's a perfect fit for the gospel. Like, did you forget you were a sinner? Did you forget you needed a savior? Did you forget you couldn't actually create your own righteousness from your good behavior? And so from there, those were sort of the underpinnings of the business, is like using all of that comes out to actually trigger you to Christ, to trigger you to go to him and enjoy him and be with him and invite him into it all, and basically like get back in touch with the joy of your salvation.
Wow. The I, I hang out on Facebook groups for dads, so I've heard the stories and have my own experience of the irritation, the impatience, the anger. But I'm so glad you shared that, because I I don't hear that many moms talking about it. Maybe you guys talk about it in your closed groups, or at MOPS meetings. But I can just imagine that, because guys feel this, but maybe women even more. The moms are supposed to be nurturing and caring and warm and patient and empathetic, and so I can just imagine if you struggle with anger, it's very easy to feel guilty
Mm-hmm.
about feeling that way. And um, the uh, so yeah, it's uh, you mentioned that your church was really helpful. I'm curious how. It sounds like they did well with supporting you as a mom. Was that like through the preaching, or more like group or one-on-one uh, type relationships?
Yeah. I think absolutely the preaching. Um, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but he has and the elders too, the preaching and teaching, like they have, like they will not, it's always about the gospel. Everything always comes back to Christ and the gospel, and how our relationship with God is fixed because of what he has done for us, in spite of what we have done. And that kind of bringing it back to that in every area, I think sort of started to change the way that I was, to change the way my brain was processing my relationship with God, and realizing like, oh, it's
Mm,
really not dependent on me and my behavior, my relationship with God. Like
mm,
he is actually happy with me all of the time, because like when he sees me, he sees the righteousness of Christ. He has given me righteousness,
mm.
and I can't produce it on my own. I have to receive it as a gift from him.
Yeah.
And because he has given it to me, then it like frees me up. It frees me up to, I don't have to hide. I don't have to hide from him. I don't have to be afraid he's going to be mad at me when he sees me lose my temper,
Mm,
or wallow in shame, because I'm not who I know I should be. Like he already knows I'm not who I should be. That's why he sent his son to die on the cross for us. And so, if I um, screw up and start to, I think a lot of times we can lose our temper or whatever and start to then kind of spiral down into guilt and shame. And
mhm.
it can just create all these other behaviors that are just as bad as the first one, and really that's like the moment when it's like, no, 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 no. Like I don't belong in guilt and shame anymore because of what Christ has done for me. Like I can
Mm,
just claim the crown because he's given it to me, and enjoy him and repent and then rejoice, and even invite my children into that moment, kind of using that moment to share the gospel with them. I totally forgot what question you just asked
oh
though.
no,
I'm
that's
just like, I'm going
oh
down a
no,
rabbit trail.
that's fine. I was just asking, like, how your church has helped
Oh
in
yeah,
what
my
you've learned.
churches.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
So
so
definitely
not
the
needing.
preaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then, but then also like, I went to the women's Bible study. And it was just so honest. There
Mm,
was no, and I think that is a reflection of the teaching, that the teaching over and over is like, you've been given righteousness. You don't need to pretend like you are creating it. You don't need to pretend like you have it all together. We all know that we're all screwed. I think that's one of the things that, I struggle with a little bit, is a lot of times it seems like um, in churches, we have to like, make sure our kids are behaving really well and like put on this front and, look great at church or whatever. There can be this like facade, but it's like, that can keep us hiding our sin, I think, right? And it's like,
mm,
we're the ones that actually believe in sin. We should be the ones talking about it with the most ease,
mm.
being the most
Ooh,
honest and open about it, because
yeah.
we're the ones that actually believe in sin, and we should be confident that it's been taken care of.
Mhm.
Um, so we don't have to hide it anymore.
Yeah, don't have to
We
be
can,
afraid of it.
yeah.
Um, well, like, yeah, there's, oh, there, I don't want to go on a rabbit trail too much, but we don't have to hide it. We don't have to be afraid of it. But so much of parenting and quote unquote Christian parenting is like from a fear of sin, of like the world corrupting our children, and yeah, it's uh and I, and I understand. I mean, I understand the tension, because we do want to quote unquote protect our kids, um, but we can kind of get weird about talking. Like it's just we don't know how to talk. We don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah.
So um, the I want to go back to what you said about bad Christian moms, because when I saw your website, and the Facebook title, I was thinking, oh, like I kind of skipped over the Christian part and like, oh, bad moms, like yes, like support for bad moms, but no, but also folks that are feeling like they're being a bad Christian. Um, that, I love that, because when we struggle with parenting and guilt and shame, like the times that we blow it, it can really kind of it does affect our faith, or we can start to question, uh like God's help, God's care for us, especially if our kids are really struggling and getting off track. That can be like really hard times as a family and as parents. Um, the w- you can share for yourself, if you want, Sarah. But maybe with what you've seen as a coach and with your group, if a mom i- is struggling with anger or any other um, issue, and it is producing guilt and shame, what does that typically look like, um, uh, when it starts happening?
Yeah. I think I think it looks like a few things, and I think we can kind of cycle through a few different things. So I think sometimes it'll look like blame shifting, like um, I'm ashamed of the way that I, just acted, but it's their fault because they weren't listening to me, or it's my husband's fault because he's not pitching in, or it's God's fault because I've been praying that he would give me more patience and he hasn't.
Mm.
So sometimes I think it looks like blame shifting. I have done all of those. um, I think sometimes it's like maybe self-pity or even like self-flagellation. Like we try to like punish ourselves and we kind of turn into like mopey mom and kind of, moping around, feeling sorry for ourselves, or, trying to punish ourselves, shame ourselves into behaving better,
Mm.
which also doesn't work. Sometimes it can look like trying to make it up to our kids by flopping back and forth between like losing my temper and then taking them out to ice cream, and kind of flopping back and forth. I think one sneaky thing we can do too is kind of force our kids to behave so that we don't get triggered by them. Like we don't want to see ourselves in that state of, anger or resentment. And so we put extra pressure on our kids to behave well, not for their
Ooh.
benefit, not to teach them, the law and grace, not to teach them what is right and wrong or teach them about the gospel, but so that I don't misbehave. I'm
Oh man,
forcing them to behave better so that I don't misbehave because I can't stand to see myself like that.
I see. Yeah, and it's like for my benefit, for
Yeah.
my peace.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think that like, those are some of the aftermath, I think, of feeling guilt and shame. But I think that going on and on and on in isolation, like I read a book called The Soul of Shame. I don't know if you've read that. I
Oh,
think
with
you.
Kurt Thompson? Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm,
I loved
mhm,
it.
mhm.
But he talks about how, shame wants to cut us off from other people and from God. And so I think, shame can keep us from praying. It can keep us from fellowship, keep us from confessing our sin. And I think So I think that that isolation, that shame, can lead to a lot of more depression and anxiety. Um, yeah, when it's not dealt with.
Right. Yeah. That that parenting is bigger than one parent or a couple can handle on their own. I just truly believe that. One of the best things when the kids were younger, when we were part of a homeschool co-op, the parents would meet on Sunday evenings once a month to check in about how things are going. And that was so helpful that, when the kids were in middle school, um, and just to not be isolated, and to hear uh, like the stories, the testimonies of other people, that
Hmm.
of what's not just what's going well, but what's hard too, is it was encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah, like a safe place to bring the darkness out into the light. This is
Mhm,
what my parenting really looks like right
mhm.
now.
Yeah, yeah. The uh, I, I'm glad we didn't have Instagram when the kids were younger, uh, because like much. And I was gonna say moments, but months, years, so many years are just not Instagram worthy with with just the realities of life, um, and growing our kids. Um, um, it, it's great when you get through it, but in the middle of it, it's like, uh, It it's, it can be definitely rough, or like you said, dark. It can be dark
Hmm.
at
Yeah.
times. Yeah. It's neat, th neat. Um, it's I I'm guessing it's really beneficial to your people, um, your counseling background, because, you're coaching them, but you have training and a perspective on mental illness. Can you share a little bit, Sarah, about uh, the impact of like anxiety or depression uh, for moms that you've seen?
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of going back to something you said earlier that it's more than two people can handle. And so much of it in our culture right now is it's all just falling on one, like with a
Mm,
lot of my clients, the bulk of the parenting is all falling on them. Just one person all alone with no help. It's an unreasonable ask, I think,
mm,
that our culture is making.
mm.
And I
And
think that
you did that for a while.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. And but I had my mom, my dad, they would come and help. And I had my church and some community. And so that was helpful. Um, and some people, don't even have that. I mean, especially when I hear we don't have any family around. I mean, that's like,
Yeah.
that's a big red flag of isolation and just too much of the burden falling on one person. So I think it's just like ripe ground for um, tipping over into more diagnosable depression and anxiety. It's so much pressure that and also some of the ways I think that we think about raising kids, that it's how they turn out is all my responsibility. I think we do that to the moms. Even like I'm starting to feel real sensitive when I feel like
Mm,
someone's trying to blame their mom for something that they're struggling with.
mm,
Because there's so many more factors in that. Like, why was it only your mom then that was raising,
mm.
why is she the only one to blame?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you're probably screwed up, but it was all, it was all of culture and all of family. Like, it's not just one person's fault.
Mm. Yeah. Why was mom so overwhelmed all the time
Yeah.
and depressed? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The it, one so much of it falls on one person. How would you coach or encourage uh, a mom who is wanting more help from her partner?
I mean, with my clients that, some of my clients, that's part of that's something that they want. And it can be tricky because on one hand, I'm saying it shouldn't all be on her. But on the other hand, what I teach my clients is first take responsibility for what is yours. And
Mm,
I have my clients go through kind of some course material that I've created for this type of transformation, the transformation of going from, overwhelm, guilt, anger, resentment to like gospel-centered joy and freedom.
mm,
And the first thing I have them do is just some good old self-observation, like, tuning into what thoughts are you thinking? And those thoughts are creating what feelings, and then those feelings are triggering what behaviors. And let's start to tune into that and to dial it back, and really examine those thoughts that you're having. Um, and as they start to take responsibility for the way that they're feeling and the way that they're acting and the way that they're thinking,
mhm,
so many times with my clients, it's been so fun to see how that ends up affecting their husbands. Um, and even how that ends up affecting their husbands' relationships with their kids, which is such a fun, like, snowball effect, as the mom takes more responsibility for her anger and for the thoughts that are triggering that, and starts to, move around some self-care and move around some concepts of vocation and responsibility. um, they start to treat the kids a little bit differently. And then the husbands often do too. And, so I don't know, we talk about a lot of things. And, so we talk about meta communication. Like, that's something I've been going over with my clients lately, is like, it might be a good time to have a conversation with your husband about having conversations.
mm.
Where is the best place for you guys to have a conversation? When is the best time? What is the best, like, way that you can talk about this issue that won't just end up in, defensiveness and attacking? Like, talk about how you can talk about this in a way that's actually going to be productive. Start there.
Yeah, I love that. Setting yourself up for success. It's already going to be maybe a challenging, difficult conversation. So giving it a chance.
Yeah.
Uh, the I can see how it's empowering, um, and really, yeah, empowering to encourage moms to take responsibility for themselves. And um, uh, where's the line between taking responsibility and or taking on too much? Because uh, part of me, when as you describe that, is like, like it's still mom doing all the
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. I know.
Can you maybe clarify that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's kind of back to the boundaries, right? Like, I'm responsible for my thoughts and my feelings and my actions. Those are my responsibility. And I'm not responsible for other people's. And so I want to emphasize with my clients that they are responsible for their thoughts and their feelings and their actions. But then, after we kind of practice that, then I want to also kind of get into like the concept of vocation. God has called us to some things. He has called us to some vocations. What are those vocations? Like, he has absolutely called me to be a child of God. That is my number one vocation, is being in a relationship with him.
Mm,
He has also called me to be a wife to my husband, and he has called me to be a mother to my children. Those are very clear vocations that God has called me to be right now. Um, right now, for me personally, like, I'm also, one of my vocations is a life coach. But that one comes in underneath. That one is not as important or as primary as the other three. And then under that, or maybe not under that, but also along, there's other vocations, like a member of my church and a member of my community. And when my kids went to school, a member of a parent at the school, other Vocations, and so I have my clients kind of list those out and take a look at the priority levels of all of them, and then really spend some time thinking and praying about, like, has God actually called me to all of this? Like, what has God for sure called me to? He has for sure called me to child of God. But has God called me to, PTO and Sunday school and soccer mom and, all of the things that we can think that we need to do? Let's like really examine that and see, like, maybe not. Maybe like it's, and the pandemic has I think been clarifying in some ways for people to have a moment of like so many vocations just wiped out, so many responsibilities and commitments just wiped out, and it gave us a chance, I think, to to kind of look at those more priority level vocations. Anyhow, all that to say is, um, let's make sure we're not heaping more onto our plate than God Almighty has called us to do, because maybe He wants us to have less on our plate so that there's more margin to play with, to be available for, to actually enjoy. Like, he's Kurt Thompson in that book, like, we were made for creativity and joyful connection with God and with each other. And I'm bringing my clients back to that a lot. Like, maybe God wants a little more margin in your life, so that you can do what you were made to do, which is joyfully connect with Him and with others and be creative in some form. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so good. Just uh, stripping things down to the essentials, the 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 most primary vocation. I like that term. Uh, so many parents, uh, moms. Half of the week I do health coaching, so I'm talking to people about exercise and stress management, and I can see how uh, evaluating all those pressures or roles, um, and kind of simplifying things could help with the exhaustion and the overwhelm, and having more margin. Uh, the we've talked about anxiety and depression, guilt and shame. Are there any other challenges that you're seeing in your group or with your clients, Sarah, that moms are facing these days?
Um, well, one of the things that we've been focusing on in my group, like, I kind of added in another element, just realizing that, like, these mamas don't have a place to talk about sex. Like, Christianity is not talking about sex, and it should be talking about sex a lot more. And what I've been like pondering this for years. Like,
Hmm.
what does a real healthy, like, sex life look like in a healthy Christian marriage? Like, what does that actually look like? There can be like so much tension. So it can be so hard to communicate about, so much shame. And so I recently added an extra coaching call to my client call week, or however you say that, where it's a safe place to talk about marriage and sex, and we've been talking about it, from a zoomed out level, like, what is the purpose, what is the meaning of marriage, how does it help us see, like, who God is, and understand more what the Trinity is like, and Christ in the church. But then we also get down into the details of sex and pleasure. And I don't know if you're familiar with authentic intimacy, but I don't know. There's a lot. I'm excited because I'm just discovering a lot more resources out there that I didn't realize
Yeah.
were out there.
Is that with
Um,
Julie Slatter?
Julie
Slatter?
Slattery. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
great.
Hmm.
Um,
That's a great website.
it is.
Yeah.
There's so much in there, and so much so relevant to so much of the cultural stuff going on.
Yeah. Well, what I like about that site and her approach is she really integrates spirituality. Um, I I think a lot of Christian. Well, I got to be careful here. Um, Sometimes and this is like with sexual intimacy books, but then also just marriage. There's the like broad overview. I like it zoomed out. So like the meaning of marriage is a good example of that. Um, is like the theological foundations, and so there's those types of books. Sacred Marriage by Gary Thomas is another,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's like the nuts and bolts of like how to actually have a fight and communicate. They're very compartmentalized, and we do that with sexuality. I think as evangelical Christians is like there's like the Bible and theology part, and then there's like the how to books. The night and it's like theory and there's technique, right? And the same thing with parenting too. There's like this flowery white tower view of like what parenting should be and look like, and then there's the actual nitty gritty
Mm-hmm. But how in
stuff.
the world do you actually do it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think authentic intimacy. Another podcast I recommend and website I recommend is Sexy Marriage uh, Radio. That's a great resource that tries to integrate and like kind of break down that compartmentalization. Um, and I think that I think that helps us be healthier. Is to be able to talk about it in a uh, like an honest and integrated way. But we can't even talk about it when we're so compartmentalized and uncomfortable with our bodies and sexuality
Yeah.
in the first place.
Yeah. And I think we miss out on like sex is trying to tell us something about God. And
Mm,
I'm not entirely sure what all it's trying what all it's trying to
okay.
tell us about God, but like I want to know. Like there is something pretty deep and pretty amazing about why he made it and how it teaches us about him and who he is. And I'm happy to provide a place for my clients where we can explore that, both the nuts and bolts and the, high view of it, um, and how they shall not be separated. Like they go together, like
Mm,
the nuts and bolts and the philosophy or the meaning of it, like are
mm.
very much um, meant to go together.
Yeah, yeah. It, uh, 15 years into marriage counseling, I'm still feel like a beginner, but uh, I'm really wanting to study more about uh, trauma and healthy sexuality. Those are uh, two areas that I really want to grow in, and after 27 years of marriage too, uh, it's sexuality. It develops and changes over a lifetime, different seasons with kids coming
Mm-hmm.
and going.
Yeah.
So
And
that's me.
staying.
Yeah, yeah. So that's so. I'm glad you're adding that to the coaching work that you're doing. Uh, the so uh, as we wind down our time for today, Sarah, do you have any other last thoughts that you want to share with listeners?
um I get the first thing that came to my mind actually is like that the process of sanctification and like growing and changing, it can be really fun. Like it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be a drag or boring or something you have to like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps to do. Like
Mm,
growing and changing and the process of sanctification can be fun. And I think but I think it requires community, like a
mm,
community that you can be honest and open in and laugh a lot with, and be both lighthearted and deep at the same time. And again, I think it's the gospel that allows us to walk that line of like, I'm broken, um, and I'm redeemed. And so this is me. This is who I am. I'm broken and I'm redeemed. Like now what do I do? Let's talk about it together, and try something else and fail at it and then learn from it and try something else. And I think that's growing. And then eventually you look back. This is what how my clients describe it. Like, it's like, it feels like a turtle pace, but then, a few months down the road or a year down the road, they look back and they're like, I have grown so much. Like I see where I was and I'm not there anymore. And I'm in a better place. So yeah, it can be fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, next steps for listeners who maybe need some support with their parenting, or are interested in learning more.
Yeah, for learning more, I mean, you can join my Facebook group. It's Bad Christian Moms Facebook group. But when you get in there, be sure and send me a private message so that I can touch base with you, because it's there's quite a few people in there now, and I don't want you to get lost. So be sure and send me a private message. You can also reach out to me through my website, badchristianmoms.com. So yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Sarah.
Happy to. My pleasure.